Tom, welcome to the Advisory Board podcast. I really appreciate you making time to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I know it's been a bit.
It
Uh,
has.
so, guys, I want to introduce Tom. Tom's a friend of mine, also a client, but a really savvy business, a franchise development pro. He runs Premier Franchise Solutions and is the founder and co-founder and CEO there. And how long have you been in franchise development and franchising, Tom? Let me turn it to you and
Oh,
let you introduce yourself a little bit as well.
yeah. So I've been in franchise development for about 10 years now. I've worked with well over 90 brands, awarded thousands of franchises, both domestically and internationally, and really run the gamut. I mean, everything from QSR, moving companies, full service restaurants, crime scene cleanup. I mean, you name it, we've done it.
hmm That's great. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about you, about Premiere, and what are some of the things that are unique about you guys that people that are listening to the podcast ought to remember about you.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I guess little backstory, if you will. I got into franchising, like I said, about 10 years ago. I had been with Two Men in a Truck, and great system, great people, amazing franchisees. I really truly feel that I was fortunate to learn from the best in the business when I was cutting my teeth in this game. And one of the downsides of working with a brand that has been as successful as Two Men in a Truck and that is as large as Two Men in a Truck is when you're low man on the totem pole, you're going to eventually sell yourself out of a job, right? So after we had record year after record year, um, eventually it came time to, okay, we're out of major metros. What are we going to do? I saw the writing on the wall, and I was really fortunate at that time. I had been connecting with a lot of emerging brands around the country, brands that were reaching out from different franchise conferences or trade shows, et cetera, and saying, "Hey, how can we do this, or what should we do about that? How can you help guide us in terms of our franchise development efforts?" And I thought, hey, this might be a fun little side gig. Let's see if I can make something of this until I find a new home. And here we are several years later. It obviously worked. It turned out to be more than a little side gig. We have offices here in Michigan. We have offices in just outside of Philly, out in Arizona, California. Things are going well. One of the things that I think has led to the success that we've had over the years has been that we are a boutique agency. We're selective of the brands that we work with. We feel very strongly about awarding franchises versus selling franchises.
Mhm.
We always talk about, we were founded on the idea that success is shared, dreams are real, and integrity counts. And really, what we talk about with that is success is shared, right? Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whoever you name, great success, brilliant minds, but they didn't get to where they were or where they are um, on their own. They had great people around them. They weren't afraid to sit in a room and hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and make the decisions from there. Dreams are real. We want our franchisor clients to realize their dream of growing this brand that they believe so strongly in, and we want prospects that we talk to realize that dream of business ownership and creating a legacy, creating an empire, for their families, for their kids, whatever it may be. But integrity counts. We have to remain in a mindset that franchises are awarded, they are not sold.
Mhm.
So we're selective of the brands we work with. We want to make sure that they share that mindset, and we want them to know that we are not afraid to walk away from a deal. If there's not a fit on both sides of the table, that's not going to be a mutually successful relationship. It goes right back to square one. So again, we're not afraid to walk away from a deal. Ultimately, the joke I always tell is, ultimately I'm asking a prospect to sign an agreement that's longer than my first marriage. So it's got to be a fit.
Yeah, no, that's, and I'm glad you bring that up because there are a lot of different broker networks out there that do it in different ways, and there are guys I know and have worked with that would sell a franchise no matter the impact because there's a commission on the other end of it. But
Yeah,
ultimately, you and I both know franchisors that creates a massive burden on their systems, and so it's not a win-win. That's a really short term I call slash and burn sales tactics, right? Like who cares the impact? I'm just gonna close a deal, and but we're very well aligned around that, my friends. So let,
absolutely.
let's jump into a couple of things here. So as a pro, somebody who's been in FranDev for a long time and found a lot of success and built really good systems around it, I thought it'd be great to pick your brain a little bit about some of the key tenets you shared with me that you feel are core to you guys being successful as you're involved in FranDev. The first one you brought up was speed to lead. And it's funny you bring up that term because I use that all the time as I talk to people about us, but we're not going to talk about me. I want to talk about you. So how does speed to lead play into this whole FranDev world, and why is it so important?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but I read an interesting report about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, that said something to the effect of leads that are not contacted within 4 hours of their initial inquiry, your likelihood of closing that deal drops by 70%. So speed to lead is absolutely crucial. A lead comes in, you know, Friday night, 7 o'clock, you're sitting there on the couch anyway, you're not doing anything. Pick up the phone, call them. More importantly, we know we have to have downtime. Use a system, I'm shameless plug for ClientTether, but I mean it's absolutely something that has been tremendous for us is have some sort of automation, whether that's an automated text that goes out and says, hey, Joe Schmo, Jill Schmo, thank you for your interest in XYZ brand. A member of our team will be in touch with you soon. What's a good day and time?
Mhm.
Immediately having a drip email campaign that nurtures their process or their progress. They may not be ready to pick up the phone right away, but if they were on a website, or a portal or something, and they were looking at 7, 8 brands, be the first to hit them with information because that's gonna stick with them.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me spouting a few stats here, but this is a world we live in on a daily
I love
basis.
that.
Yeah, so if you don't reach out to a lead within 5 minutes, if you wait, let's say 10 minutes instead of reaching out to them in 5 minutes after they fill out a form or fill out a portal form and get pushed to you, your chance of talking to them drops by 10x if you wait 10 minutes versus 5 minutes. And if you wait over 30
Incredible.
minutes to reach out to them instead of reaching out in the first five, your chance of ever connecting with them drops 100x. It's just a cliff. And it's wild. I've seen a few different variations of that study from different sources now, but it's all pretty universal. The faster, the better. And also to your point, especially talking about like portal leads, some of the portals out there, they'll sell that lead to 5 or 6 different brokers. And so even if they're not, being the first to contact that lead in most industries is 60% of the success equation. It's about like 50, I want to say 58, 57% of the determining factors to whether or not you're going to win the deal is if you got there first.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
Absolutely astounding. Speed to lead is crucial in this business. It really is. We are not afraid to take calls, on or make calls for that matter, nights, weekends, holidays. I mean, if this is when people are inquiring, this is when you can reach them.
Mhm.
Just get to the lead.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring. I'm going to kind of shift gears for a second. You talk about calling and call times. There's some interesting data about that. But what have you guys found or seen as far as calling times and responsiveness to calls? I talk to some people and they're like, "Oh, I don't think people want a phone call. I think I should wait to call them." But what are you guys seeing as far as responsiveness to phone calls versus emails and other things like that?
You know, it, it's all over the place. I really wish I had a heavy, tracked stat for you on this one.
Mhm.
But, it's hard to say, whether or not people's willingness to take a phone call has anything to do with the time of day. I think that more of it has to do with just the times we live in. I mean, you know, I get 6 calls a day about my extended car warranty, but I answer every single one of them because you never know if it is this a prospect calling me back, you know? And oftentimes, you do have to call that prospect 2, 3 times before they realize, oh, this isn't a robocall. Like, this guy has left me a message, or that he has sent me a text message, and I have received his emails. Like, yeah, I need to get back to them. I need to speak with them. They're reaching out. Let's quit blowing them off. But again, you are going to have tire kickers out there. You're going to have some that you just never connect with. I mean, that's just the nature of it.
That's the name of the game. Doesn't matter the industry. FranDev, I think, is probably of all the industries I've ever worked in, has the worst overall conversion rates, because I think there are so many tire kickers versus other industries like translation industry. Like I either know I've got a translation need or I don't. People that are looking at a franchise like, yeah, I might buy a business. I live in my parents' basement, live in sweatpants, and I haven't had a job for a year. Like maybe I should buy a business. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
it's that easy. Yeah.
It sounds so easy. I have a thought for you. Sorry, coming back to what we were talking about. We'll talk about tire kickers, I promise, because that's a big challenge in your industry. Have you? So, what has it been? A year now? Where Apple, and then 8 months since Google, they rolled out their do not disturb modes, and they're constantly, like, I bet you every month or so. I haven't turned mine on because I run a business, I coach a baseball team. Like, I've got friends, and I don't live in my parents' basement, so I need to accept phone calls. And I hate Snapchat and other tools that everyone wants to talk on now. So. Um, I've found that personally that these robo dialer things are getting in the way a little bit of sales and prospecting. Are you seeing an impact there? Have you seen that more and more of your calls are going straight to voicemail because people have these features turned on?
A bit, especially as spoofing numbers becomes more prevalent and whatnot. I've had a couple instances where I'll get a call, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something. Somebody will call me and say, "Hey, I just got a missed call from this number."
Mhm,
Oh, not at all. um,
mhm,
and we have to, at first I have to do the, oh yeah, we were trying to reach out to you in regards to, your interest in franchising with us, and la la la. And you got to play that game and figure out, while you're getting into your CRM and you're looking up that number, was this somebody that I actually reached out to? Spoofing has had an impact on us. I think that the do not disturb feature, yeah, there are times where, it'll go straight to voicemail, but again, having autoresponders, or having, something tied in with text to be able to say, "Hey, Dave, tried reaching you earlier today. What's a better time to reach you?" Or, however you phrase that text that can go out as part of your action plan process.
mhm.
That really helps move around some of that.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring that up. Something that we've seen just universally, not just in working with you guys, is usually most folks, when they have someone fill out their lead form, they'll send them an immediate email, and then they'll get an email in their inbox, and they'll try to call them or email them back or whatever the case may be. What we found to be the most successful sequence is texting them pretty quickly after you send that email, unless it's 2 in the morning, and then following that up a minute, maybe a minute later, with a phone call, because then they've seen your text. They say, "Oh, this is Tom calling me about that thing I just filled out a form about." And then when you call them, even if you go straight to voicemail, then they'll say, "Ah, I know who this guy is. Let me call him back."
Right.
And are you guys using it that way, where you guys have a text go out and then you call after, or have you inverted that flow?
No, we have that text go out right away. That is absolutely our first step, and it has been a tremendous lift. I mean, um, I ran a report for one of our clients yesterday. We're averaging something like a 67%, or it's either 66 or 67% contact rate, um,
Hmm.
and I can attribute that almost entirely goes out. People, again, contact we reached out, it's then.
Hey, Tom, welcome back. We had a little bit of an internet issue. So tell me,
Yeah, not sure what happened there.
you were talking about your contact rates and how your communication methodologies has improved them. Where are you guys sitting with your contact rates now? How does that stack against where you've been and what you've seen as an average in the past?
Well, right now we're sitting at a 66, 67% contact rate, which is great. It's, I think that that's phenomenal. I attribute a lot of that to that text that we were talking about.
Mhm.
Sending out that immediate message, hey, we're going to be in touch. They're expecting that call. They recognize this number now. They've received an email from you, whatever it may be, but they're more likely to interact with you. I can say that, most brands, I would say that are using some kind of an auto response tool, they should be in the high 40s, is pretty standard. But I remember not too long ago, before people were, utilizing some of these tools, where industry average contact rate was 28%. I mean, just if I went back to 28%, I'm closing the doors and boarding up the windows. I mean, you just can't survive on that anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot of grind too to try to. I mean, to that's actually I'd say about a pretty close to industry average I see all over the place. Not even in FranDev, but when you contact rate or a schedule rate for if you're in a service industry trying to schedule that next appointment or first appointment to do an estimate, or it's usually in the low to mid 20s. Uh, yeah. Anyway, I won't get into self promotion, but obviously I'm glad to see you guys are getting a bump and leveraging some tech and using texting coupled with calling, coupled with emailing. Tell me a little bit about, so that's fantastic. Where with respect to the follow-up process, because that's kind of where things went. We've been really discussing some best practices and learnings in the initial lead engagement, but that kind of shifts us now into kind of nurturing and follow-up, which is a bear, man. Like this is like 95% of sales, and everyone hates it. Like what are some things you're seeing in the follow-up space? Like what are best practices that you're using to stay in touch with these leads, and what's the impact as you guys are using effective follow-up processes to stay in touch with leads?
The number one, this is a podcast in and of itself, but the number one thing that I can say to people is lead with next. Lead with next. If you're on a call with somebody, you do not hang up that call. You're on a webinar with somebody, you do not, disconnect that connection until you have that next step set, that people understand what it is that they can expect from you, what deliverables they can expect from you,
Mhm.
and when you need deliverables back from them. Again, it's a mutual process here, right? But that's setting that next appointment. Dave, I've really enjoyed our time together. You know, what does next Tuesday look like for you? Cool. How about 2 o'clock? Whatever that is, I mean, just lead with next and follow through on what you say you're going to do.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean that that's all you're going to do. There may be things that you have set in your drip email campaign that you want them to continue to get, that may, spark that next question, or that may take them from, being interested in single unit to multi-unit, or that may entice them to, move up their due diligence process, in terms of when they're going to feel comfortable investing in that franchise. So always lead with next.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because um, I don't know how many sales teams and people on teams that I've trained or worked with over the years, but I, for whatever reason, I see people and even clients where they're very content to have a discussion, but they don't keep moving the ball forward. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I went through a year-long training once that it was kind of a waste of time because I was pretty seasoned at the time, but I always try to find a nugget. And that was the nugget years and years ago that I said, you know what, I need to be just super disciplined at this. It's made all the difference for me in just about any discussion I've had. Always looking for the next event, like what's a valuable next step for everybody, clearly defining that expectation, and then scheduling the next discussion.
And I get it, where people can kind of become complacent. I mean, I average 117 phone calls a day. Um, and it can be easy. I know that it can be easy to forget that you have to, okay, before I move on to this next call, I need to send them this application or this invite for this next webinar or this next phone call, whatever. I'll do it at the end of the day, and then 9 other things pop up and you forget. I
Yeah.
get that, but I try to remind my team on a regular basis that we actually, in terms of sales, if you will, have a pretty cushy gig. 9 times out of 10 in this industry, we're not cold calling. We're
Mhm.
responding to people that reached out to us. We're not farming for leads the way you would if you're selling like I was in telecom for years, selling a phone system or something of that nature. These are warm body leads. Keep them warm and turn them hot. Just follow through.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. Very, very, very wise and universal. It doesn't matter if you're selling telecom or you're selling franchises. It's really a universal, a kind of an axiom of sales. A couple of questions I've got with you are pertaining to expectation setting. So franchise development's a long process. I mean, what would you say the average? I know. Actually, right now there's a little bit of fluctuation, but what would you say is a typical deal length from initial contact to actually signing papers and being ready to roll with the franchisor?
It varies so much. I get asked that question a lot, Dave, and working with so many different segments of franchising,
Mm.
if I were to give you averages, they're going to be so skewed. We have one client in particular that, our average close time is 30 days. I mean, it's just remarkably fast. Yeah.
Mm.
We have another that has about 120 days, minimum 120-day cycle.
Yeah.
Um, I wish I had a better answer for you, but I mean, I would say that, you know, if we probably, especially right now, COVID-19, et cetera, if we were to really look at it, I wouldn't be surprised if the industry is averaging about a 6-month
Mhm.
cycle rate. Everybody wants to shoot for that 4, but again, it depends on the segment, and also it also depends on the initial investment. If you're looking at something that is going to require SBA funding, right? You're looking at 9 to 12 weeks of disbursement,
Yeah.
at minimum on an SBA loan. If we're looking at an SBA express loan, okay, well, that could be 30 to 60 days.
Mhm.
You know, it just varies.
Yeah, yeah, and that I know those timelines all got shoved back to. I've had a few discussions with some of our franchisor clients about creative financing options because they had 9, 12 awarded franchises that couldn't kick off because of funding. And
Yep.
PPP slowed down the SBA funding process big time.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
Not criticizing it was an important thing for the economy, but and a lot of people, but it still messed up that PPP or the SBA process quite a bit. Cool. So
Absolutely.
I guess coming back, because that was a bit of a tangent from what I was thinking about, but with respect to setting expectations, how do you like how do you manage that with a, let's say, an eager person that's interested in the franchise brand and concept? How do you help them understand like what's next and what do you need from them, and then what will you do? And because there's a process and there's a ton of give take. You got to get questionnaires filled out and resumes and build the case for the franchisor. What are some of the best practices you train your team to use to make sure you're setting and managing expectations clearly?
I think that it's a big part of it is lead with transparency. Again, it goes back to not only the lead with next, but do what you say you're going to do. I've got a prospect that I'm working with right now, which kind of touches on a lot of the things that we've talked about so far. Lead came in on like a Friday afternoon, I want to say.
Mhm.
Called him immediately, went to voicemail. I left him a voicemail. Um, got him set up with drip email and the whole nine. I mean, he's automatically in the system. He's getting all that. And then Monday rolls around, haven't heard from this guy. I'm looking at my call log for the day, and I gave him a call, and um, again went to voicemail. This time it at least rang 3, 4 times, but it went to voicemail.
Yeah.
And then the next day he called me back. We had an intro call about the brand. And one of the things I asked him, and I ask every prospect, is what is your time frame? When are you looking to have XYZ open? And one, you're going to do that to make sure it's a realistic time frame, or do I need to reset expectations? But he said, Tom, I'm ready to go yesterday. And I said, okay, well,
Nice.
here's what I'm going to send you is our application. Get this back to me. I'll get you the FDD. I mean, the same process everybody goes through, right? Well, this guy was Johnny on the spot. I sent him that application on Tuesday. He got the application back to me on Wednesday. He was disclosed on Wednesday. And then I had his receipt page on Thursday. And then um, yesterday, so we didn't speak on Friday, but yesterday I got him introduced to one of our lending partners. But each step of the way, I've said, this is what we're doing next.
Mhm.
Yesterday, I was on a call with him and I said, look, I know you wanted to get going yesterday. I need you to send me your availability for getting a discovery day set up.
Mhm.
And that's where we're at right now. He just texted me probably in the last 20 minutes saying, here's some days I'm available next week. Great. Let's get this done by the end of the month.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I think one, having the clear map. The nice part is franchise sales. There, it's fairly regulated, so there are certain things that you have to do, which helps keep the process clear. But yeah, I've talked to several people that have purchased franchises and have said, I felt a little lost, like I didn't know where we were going or what road I was on, or even what vehicle I was in. I felt like I was kind of blindfold through the woods and bumping into trees. And so I think that's a really good piece of advice to take away from this. It's just keep it clear.
One of the things that we do too is we send out, for lack of a better term, I don't exactly know how to describe it over the phone. Internally, my team knows what I'm talking about, but we send out a calendar of events, and it basically says, these are the steps that you're going to go through.
Mhm.
Here's who's responsible for each step. And so they've got this outlined, and each call that we're on, I mean, they're checking that off, like saying, okay, well, we've already done this, we've already done this, we've already done this. Here's what's left.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't worked with any other group that's doing that. You send them the checklist of action items that need to be done to move forward through the process. It's hard to be more transparent and clear in expectation setting than that, Tom.
Well, we try.
I love it, man. So how did that come about? That's a really creative idea. It's not like as you said, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, but it wasn't like, you just created like a benzene ring or something.
Well, I'd love to take credit for it, but that old expression, beg, borrow, cheat, and steal. You know, I uh, I saw this from one of my clients had something just very rudimentary that they had drawn up, that they they had drawn this up for themselves so that they were a new franchisor, and they kind of put this all together so they could understand what the flow should be. And when I saw it, I was like, that's absolutely brilliant. I said, I could see this being used for the franchisee. And we kind of talked through how that would work. And I said, can I steal this? Can I, one, I want to use it for your brand, but two, can I steal this for, my other clients? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. We're all, it's a franchise family. We're all in this together. So I can take zero credit.
Yeah, that's right. But you implemented it. As you saw the opportunity and implemented it. That's kind of
Well,
where genius strikes.
and it goes back to what I said, success is shared. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I want to be surrounded by those people. I want to hear the great ideas from others and implement them where appropriate.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it. Love it. Well, most of my great nuggets and universal truths are borrowed elsewhere. I mean, same sort of a thing. But when you can start to piece together some of these like genius ideas that you see all over the place as best practices, I mean, truthfully, it's a big part of the purpose of this podcast. Is I want to find people who've had those strokes of geniuses, have pieced things together and are doing it well, because other people will see what you're doing, Tom, and say, "Oh, that's actually a really good idea. I should try that out. Or they'll say, man, doesn't fit for me. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's okay.
Which is fine. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I mean, it is the franchise family, right? I mean, my goal in in this industry ultimately is to be a steward of the franchise community. I don't want to ever be in a position where, I'm guarding the secret sauce too closely. I mean, none of us invented it. I mean, we refine it as we go, but
Yeah.
let's lift each other up and, share in that success.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing that with us today. There's a big topic that I promised we'd come back to early on. We've talked about tire kickers a couple of times.
Yeah.
Everybody that's listening to this that's in FranDev is groaning right now, like, oh yeah, what is Tom going to say about tire kickers? But yeah, the reality is there are tons of them out there. I would guess, as we were chatting before we started, I would be suspicious there are a lot more tire kickers in this space than any other space. As you're trying to sell things. At least that's my impression, having been in lots of different industries before franchising. How do you guys approach
That's
tire
pretty
kick?
accurate.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, but the other thing to remember too, and I touched on this a bit earlier, is that complacency piece, right? I mean, you never know when a tire kicker is going to become a prospect. I mean, just because they were, on the internet at 2 o'clock in the morning because they were mad at their boss and, saying, forget it, I'm going to go do my own thing. Or,
Mhm.
whether it's, it's their New Year's resolution. This is the year that I become my own boss, you never know when one of those is actually going to turn around and go from tire kicker to an actual franchisee, a closed deal.
Mhm.
Um, does it happen all the time? No. Again, the complacency piece. Remember that we are in such a fortunate position that we are not cold calling.
Mhm.
They're coming to us. All you got to do is pick up the phone.
Mhm.
You know, and being persistent, calling them. Yeah, at some point you got to cut one loose, right? But, I've had several instances. I kind of touched on it with this guy that I'm working on right now. We reached out to him 3, 4 times before he finally called me back a week ago yesterday. And now here we are, we're setting up a discovery day. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's well, I love it. Tell me, have you found patterns? Because that's the one thing that I wonder. I always look for patterns, but are there certain things that certainly categorize people as tire kickers that are unlikely to move on that you've seen in your experience?
I really don't want to I don't want to lump everybody in on this one, but we've all experienced this. I mean, you get a portal lead, right? That says they've got $10,000 in liquidity when it's a you know $250,000 initial investment on the low end, right?
Mhm.
And you immediately are going to look at what info did they provide and say, oh well, they've only got $10,000 in liquidity. This guy's not going to go anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I guess that stereotype is true, but it's also important to remember that, a lot of people don't want to tell you how much money they have.
Mhm.
They're going to put in the low end because they're going to say, no, like I want to learn more about it, but I'm not giving this internet form that much information about me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, that's probably hadn't really thought about that, but there are certainly things if it's not required, I skip it absolutely online. I'm not gonna volunteer more information than Google and Facebook already have about me,
Right.
and yeah, that's a really good thing to think about. When you're working with folks, I guess this is a mindset question too. How do you keep your mindset up? Because a lot of the guys I know and gals in the industry that are franchise brokers for in FranDev teams, they're really pretty cynical, right? They would see that and say, 10 grand, like, I'm not even gonna bother calling you, schmuck. Like, I don't have time for you. I've got 50 other leads to call. How do you keep your mindset up? And how do you train your team to keep their mindset up as you guys see these leads come through that on the surface may be, maybe poppers, but underneath it all, they're actually really, golden opportunities.
It is hard to keep that mindset individually, but also make sure that it's a shared mindset among the team. I mean, it is easy to get into a rut and just be like, my God, like, is anyone ever going to be qualified for this brand, or am I ever going to get a real lead? Yeah, that happens. But again, I mean, I hate to kick a dead horse here, but one of the things that I talk about all the time is I'll share with my team different success stories that we've had and I'll show them like, here's the paperwork on some of these leads, right?
Mhm.
That they showed they were a $10,000 liquidity person, but in reality, they weren't comfortable sharing how much they had. And they ended up being a multi-unit owner. They have 13 locations with XYZ brand.
Yeah.
That's a nice day at the office when you get one of those. Um, it's also, again, back to kicking the dead horse, but it's important to remember that we're not cold calling. What does it take to call and leave a voicemail, right? 1 minute and 17 seconds roughly.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a minute and 17 seconds out of your life. Do it 5 times. You wasted 8 minutes of your life, over the course of that contact approach. If it didn't go anywhere, cool. It's 8 minutes you can't have back. You can find it somewhere else.
You spend more than that time on Instagram, while you're waiting in line at the grocery store. Like, come on.
Spend more time arguing about crap that doesn't matter and that we can't change on Facebook with complete strangers. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
this this could be following up with that one lead could be the difference between, not right now with COVID, but it could be the difference between, an amazing vacation for your family. It could
Mhm.
be paying off credit cards. It could be whatever that goal is. It could be the difference between 8 minutes of your life and or providing a new life for your family in whatever capacity that may be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great perspective to keep. Y- when when you've run into some challenges with tire kickers, how do you, one of the things that's a little sensitive is how do you dismiss people, right? And I'll take this one a step back because personal opinion, we work in the franchise family. Everybody that we ever talk to, I feel like they deserve the dignity of a fair shake to try to help them analyze. They deserve some value even if they don't end up buying from me. I want them to walk away smarter, more capable, better suited to talk to the next person, even if they end up not using our automation platform to engage their leads like you guys are, right? Like, that's kind of how I feel about it. But there are times where we're not a good fit. And so having like a proper process where you're exiting that dialogue with dignity, and also I've had people that aren't a good fit that have within 2 weeks referred clients to me, like, oh yeah, they're fantastic to work with, blah blah blah. We just weren't a good fit because we were a restaurant and they don't really do much with restaurants, like that. So how do you guys have that offboarding process in your lead flow so that you don't get tied up? Because you can get tied up with folks that are definitely going nowhere, and you verified that, and now that they're still chatty and they want to visit because they're maybe retirees, and so you're the only person that calls them besides their son-in-law. How do you, and that's mean stereotyping. I don't mean to be mean, but
I know what you mean, though.
you know
Yeah,
what I'm
I mean, pulling it out of thin air example.
saying?
Um, I think for me, and I feel comfortable speaking for my team when I say this, but it comes back to that shared success, that dreams are real, and the integrity counts piece, right? If we have led with clear expectations, one of the expectations that we're setting up front is as early on as that first call when we're talking about the application. We're talking about the balance sheet exercise that's on every franchise brand's application, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that we talk about is, look, this is important to us because we want to make sure that you're going to be able to meet your personal obligations as well as your professional obligations. Your family and your well-being is important to us. You're joining our family.
Mhm.
And if we've led with that and we've told them why it is that we're looking for certain things, when it comes to offboarding, having a conversation, Dave, I love your passion, and I think that you would be fantastic. You'd be a fantastic entrepreneur. I'd really like to revisit this conversation. When you're able to put away a little bit more money, or if you were able to bring a partner that maybe has some industry experience to the table,
Mhm.
but ultimately your passion, it's definitely shared. We feel that, but for your success, we think that these are the things that would be needed in order for us to feel comfortable moving forward.
Hmm.
you know you know, give them integrity, give them, something to be proud of, but don't just be like, oh, well, you don't have any money, see you later. Or, oh, you've never run a restaurant, or you've never run a moving company, bye. Um, Share with them what it is that made you continue the conversation in the first place, and share with them what it is that you need to see change in order for you to move the process forward. They'll thank you for it in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I've got a personal friend, good friend of mine I've worked with before, and he's really looking into franchising now. And he called me up out of the blue and we were chatting. He's like, "Oh, and I asked him what he's up to. He's like, I'm actually looking at buying a franchise." I was like, "Dude, why didn't you call me?" Because I'm connected to all these people that know, that world, could introduce you to every brand that might fit your needs. So we chatted about it for a while, and he'd had a broker. He's like, "No, it's going pretty well. I got a guy I'm working with." And then like 2 weeks later, he and I were talking. He's like, I said, how's it going, the franchise hunt? Which brands are you looking at? And he said, honest truth is it's not going well because, we went down the road with this brand. It seemed like a good fit. And at the last minute, and this guy's got plenty of liquid assets. He's a golden lead. He's a really capable businessman. He's been very successful in selling things for many years. So if I were a franchise broker, I'd say, I want this guy because he's going to be, to your point, a rock star. It was about any concept. And it's like, yeah, I decided I didn't want to do it. And my broker started yelling at me and telling me that I was never going to achieve my dreams. And like, he was a total butthead. And I was like, that's really crazy he would do that, because that's a terrible offboarding process. He's trying to like bully you and beat you into submission to get you to move forward with a deal because he wants a commission. He doesn't care about the franchisor and your success there. He doesn't care about you personally succeeding and getting fulfillment in what you're doing. It really caught me off guard, and obviously won't share any names, but on this podcast. But I was a little surprised at the offboarding process, and it didn't need to be offboarding. All I needed to do is say, "Hey, no problem, man. Well, these are the other 3 brands that we've considered. Do you want to move forward with one of those? And here's our expectations of what the next steps are." And that's all I needed to do. And he probably would have closed a franchise, but instead he let his ego get in the way, and he had no delicate way of handling that situation, which surprised me.
2 examples that is really unfortunate that your friend dealt with that, and there is definitely a better way of handling that. 2 examples that popped in my head while you were sharing that story, though. The first is I had this goes back several years. I had a burger brand that I was representing.
Mhm.
Big fan of the brand to this day. But we had a prospect that I had been working with for a little while. On paper, they were fantastic. On the phone, they were great. And we got all the way to Discovery Day, and these guys come in, and we did the whole smorgasbord, the full menu tasting where I'm going to gain 10 pounds at the end of this Discovery Day kind of deal.
Yeah.
And great conversation, but ultimately these guys wanted to change everything down to the ketchup. They were set on doing their own thing. And I remember the onboarding process with or the offboarding process, excuse me, with them, having a conversation, something along the lines of like, you guys are fantastic. We love you. But ultimately, I mean, you guys are, you know, entrepreneurs through and through. And truthfully, I think you're going to be miserable following a system. You guys are not going to want to march to the beat of our drum. You need to do you. And they did. They were like, you know what? You're absolutely right. We were actually going to say the same thing to you. We loved the food, but there's certain things that we want to bring to the table, and we might just be better off doing our own thing. Cool. Wish you the best. The other one I think about that I thought about was, one of my best friends. I mean, he made his first million our senior year of high school.
Hmm.
He sold his company 6, 7 years ago for a couple hundred mil. I mean, he's doing okay, right? And every now and then he and I will have conversations about, what I do for a living and everything. And he'll ask about this brand or that brand. And I've said to him multiple times, dude, you would make the world's worst franchisee. Like, you are just too entrepreneurial. And, it's true. I'm patting his ego at the same time, telling him like, yeah, this ain't gonna happen for you.
Yeah, don't bother calling me about a franchise brand. I'm
Right.
not going to suffer through that. Yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to put one of my franchisor clients through it.
Yeah.
So there
That's
are better ways of offboarding.
yeah, but there we go back to one of the tenets you talked about before of setting clear expectations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Tom, this has been fantastic. Just a couple of summary thoughts as I think through what we discussed. I really enjoyed your insights about speed to lead, like why you got to get there first and how that's impacting your contact rates. The setting clear expectations and follow up with your clients, always scheduling the next appointment, the next event. I think that's just golden advice for anybody. And then being persistent with the tire kickers because you never know who's a prince and who's a pauper. Like that's actually just I think everyone needs to remember that a little bit. And then your insights about offboarding with some delicacy, with some dignity. I think that's actually really good advice. And I appreciate you sharing a little bit of your dialogue um, concepts with a little bit of a Tom script because that's a really good. I think some people are going to find a lot of value in that and maybe realize they can be a little bit better in the way that they offboard people that aren't a good fit for the brand or for their process. Cool. Any
Well,
parting thoughts for us, man? Anything else you'd want to share?
Dave, I got to tell you, man, I'm honored that you asked me to do this today. Be happy to have an offline discussion with you about this anytime, and anybody who wants to reach out and have these same kind of conversations, definitely feel free. I mean, again, we believe in being stewards of the franchise community and really sharing in the success together and building up this community together. So thank you for this opportunity. This has been great.
Yeah, well, I've appreciated it. And I'm sure you'll have some people take you up on the offer. Thanks again, Tom.